Hello, and welcome to Matter's Tales from the Trenches. I'm Stephen Collins, the CEO of Matter. We are a healthcare technology incubator and innovation hub with a mission to accelerate the pace of change of healthcare. We do three things in service of our mission. First, we incubate startups. We launched in 2015, and since then have worked with more than 800 companies, ranging from very early to growth stage startups. And we have a suite of services to help them at every stage of development. Collectively, our companies have raised almost $5 billion to fuel their growth. Second, we work with large organizations such as health systems and life sciences companies and payers to strengthen their innovation capacity. We help them find value in emerging technology solutions, empower internal innovators to unlock the value of their ideas, and create a more human-centered healthcare experience through system-level collaborations. And third, we are a nexus for people who are passionate about healthcare innovation. We bring people together to be inspired and learn and connect with each other. We produce a lot of programs, including large-scale events for the broader community, as well as small forums exclusively for our members. Tales from the Trenches is our longest-standing series here at Matter, where accomplished entrepreneurs share their journeys from how they got started to what they've learned along the way. Today, we're joined by Shar Matin, who's the CEO of cardiovascular leader Cordis. Shar started his career at NUMMI, which many fellow MBAs in the audience will recognize as the subject of a well-known case study, but quickly moved into medical devices and has been leading teams and companies in the space for the last 25 years. I want to give a shout out to a longtime friend of Matter's and to Shar's, Stephen Morales, who introduced us to Shar. Stephen's with a firm called the Bluefin Group, a life sciences strategy consulting firm that brings its clients' science to market and helps ensure that patients have affordable access to needed products in a timely manner. Shar will be interviewed by Nancy Sullivan, who's the CEO and Managing Director of Illinois Ventures. She has deep experience in commercialization and entrepreneurship, specifically in the biotech and therapeutics industries. Shar and Nancy, thank you so much for joining us today. We are very much looking forward to the conversation. And Nancy, I will turn things over to you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Stephen. And Shar, welcome. It's great to have you here today. I'm really excited to get a chance to hear a little bit about your background, your career track. But what really intrigues me on the front end of things is people get to know you, and we have lots of folks joining us today. Everyone gets to read the bio we send around. I'd like to go through the icebreaker and start off with you telling us a little bit of something about yourself that people who might have known you early in your career, folks who joined today would never expect the CEO of Cordis to tell. What would they be surprised to know about you?
Great. Thank you, Nancy. And it's a pleasure to be here with all of you today. And I mean, to kick it off, if you look at my team or, someone like myself who's had the career I've had and being so lucky and fortunate, you'd never imagine that in the moment, sometimes I lose my train of thought. I actually forgot my own sister's name. So I was introducing her to somebody else and totally blanked. And I can tell you she was not amused with me when she's like, we've been together for this many years and you still don't remember my name. So I thought that was a fun story to share with all of you.
I'll tell you what, Shar, I'm glad that happens to people besides me. So this is going to be an important conversation. We're going to have on our call today a number of aspiring entrepreneurs, active entrepreneurs, and people who are thinking about what's next in their career, as well as how are they going to build their business. And our Q&A today is going to cover lots of different subjects to help answer some of those questions from you, Shar, and the lessons learned. I want the audience to know I'm watching Q&A. Feel free to add questions at any time. But Shar, I'm going to kick it off and ask you the generalist question of really, what inspired you to enter healthcare? How did you get here?
Yeah, I would say part of it was by chance. And, I think the opportunity to build things, I've always been passionate as an engineer to build things. And the opportunity to do that and save lives was just a great situation early in my career. But if you'd asked me when I was in my 20s what I'd be doing, I thought I'd be designing cars or airplanes. And reality is I signed up for an interview with a company called Guidant at the time that made medical devices. And a friend of mine put me in touch with Stephen Morales, one of your members. And if it weren't for him, I wouldn't be in it. And it's been an incredible journey since. And what a privilege it is for me and my team and all of us in this industry. And as we put it at Cordis, we're the people behind the people that keep saving lives. And that's what it's all about. It's about the physician being this all-star, and how do we provide the tools that level the playing field and bring the best care to patients each and every day.
I love it. But what I really like, and I want to hear more about, is chance. How has chance played pivotal roles in your life? And chance on its own sometimes doesn't pay off, but I've watched many accomplished careers of people like yourself, Shar, take advantage of chance. Can you talk to our entrepreneurs who are in the middle of taking advantage of opportunity and chance, and how you see that and what your willingness is when you said yes to that chance?
Yeah, and you call it chance, you can even call it risk. And it's almost in every decision that you make. And as I reflected on my career and all the different opportunities, that if you ask someone early in their career, or when I give career advice to folks, someone wants it mapped out. How do I go from this job to that job to the next one? How do I keep getting promoted? Almost in a linear format. And if you look at my career, I started as a manufacturing engineer in Santa Clara, California, ended up in Ireland. Next thing I know, I was out in Southeast Asia, and then in China, and then back to Europe, and then the US. And every one of those, with both large companies and smaller companies, was someone providing an opportunity and for me to say yes. And I didn't even think it was a risk. And for many entrepreneurs that are out there, going from a steady job to start your own business, that's a risk you're taking. That's a bold move, and you should be very proud of that. And perhaps we don't realize the level of risk we're taking, but it's by taking that risk that someone like your members or myself, that opportunities are created. Then you've got to have the right skill sets. You've got to have the right team. You got to have the right culture. You build an organization that then can take advantage of, that opportunity or that chance. And I don't think you can map it all out from the get-go. It's really situational. And you've got to have an organization that can be nimble enough to recognize that opportunity and then take advantage of it.
Thank you for that. It's kind of cool, because I do think chance is really about knowing opportunity and having the fortitude to take the risk. And that's really, I think, for those people today, many are taking that risk. And it's nice to hear from you, Shar, about how it pays off and what you get to learn from it, and giving yourself a little credit for taking that risk. I'm going to switch gears a little bit. I do love to read people's bios, and part of your bio, there's a line that intrigued me. It was, Shar helped disrupt the healthcare market by building exceptional teams. That's an intriguing line in a bio. How do you think about leadership at Cordis as the CEO? How do you think about building teams? Now and earlier in your career, can you give us a flavor of that?
Yeah, absolutely. And the further you go on in your career, the more you realize it's the team and the talent that you have in your organization that's the most important. And once you have the team, it's the culture, and then it's about the strategy and the execution. But it's those four elements that really drive whatever enterprise that you've got. And a lot of folks talk about talent. I mean, GE and the cycle of what they do and how they build leaders, everyone's trying to emulate it, but really to get to the root of it, of how to do it, has been an apprenticeship for myself. And I can tell you, early in my career, I'd look at a resume and I was looking for the level of experience they had, either in a function or in that specific, med tech sector that I was recruiting for. And it was all about their experience level. And I didn't take it to the DNA of an individual. And that's really the foundational transformation, as I've recruited and built teams, has been to get to the place where, there's things you can teach and there's things you can't. You can't teach smarts, you can't teach integrity, you can't teach drive. So recruiting for those as, the non-negotiable items, and then looking at, the pluses, or, do they have a set of experiences or track record of success in your specific industry? but taking it to that core element and then understanding, are they compatible with the culture you're trying to build? So that's been a lot of the effort and focus that I've put in the teams I've built in the last decade that were very, very different from what I did in the first decade of my career.
You know, it's interesting when you talk about team, because in the venture world, we say the same thing. We'll invest in a B technology and we want an A team. It's almost become, overused and oversaid, but it's that drill down. It's when you talk about the DNA of people. How do you get to that? How do you assess passion? How do you assess drive? How do you assess that DNA you talk about when you're looking to hire? So people, as they build their teams and teams matter on resources, how do you get there? How do you do that work?
Yeah, and the way that we've done it, and I've started using this first, and there's I'll put in a word for a book that was transformative for myself as well. It was The Who by G.H. Smart, and it totally changed the way I looked at both teams and how to assess talent. And the key elements to it is, early on again in my career, I'd look at the team that I had. And I try to get the most out of every individual that I had, and then what could we do collectively? And in that book, it talks about, if you're playing poker, do you just settle with the hand that you have, or do you make changes and move things around, or try to pick two more cards to get a better hand so that you can win the game? And so it's not about building a family, it's about building a high-performing sports team. That's the best correlation to what we're doing in business. Business is a sport. So first and foremost, you got to find the best athletes you can find out there. And then you got to, to determine who is that best athlete. What we do is we build something called a scorecard. What's the mission of that job over the next 3 to 5 years? What are the real key accomplishments you expect that leader to come in and achieve in the first 12 or 24 months? And then interview that individual that candidate you're considering to those key elements and see, do they have a track record of success that demonstrates, that they're going to be successful in this role. And one of the examples is, if you get a vice president of sales, if they're really good at turnarounds, they may not be great at market development, if that's what your business needs. So even in a job description, you need that specificity of what you expect, and then really interview to those key elements to find, do you have the right talent that's going to stack the deck in your favor to win with the rest of your team?
Okay, so now just get to the action on it. You've stacked the deck, you've got the team you want. Tell me about some of the outcomes those teams have helped drive for you. How does that complete dedication to the right leadership, growing people, building a team, tell me the outcomes, interesting things that you've been able to take. You took the risk, you built the team. How did that work for you?
Yeah, and before I go to that piece of it, I'll say, as important as a team is the culture, right? And personally, I didn't know what culture was until I started changing companies. And you can see there's different successful companies with different cultures. You've got to figure out what culture you build, because that's what's going to attract the talent that you want and keep it there. So as important as the talent is the culture. And if you've got those two, then you get everyone in the room, you figure out, what are the key strategic initiatives and the tactical actions that you need to take around that to win in the marketplace and really achieve the vision and the mission that you set out for your organization. And to give you an example of how we did that, the past company, we were a $250 million medical device company. There was Medtronic and Covidien were coming together and merging. I don't know if you remember that, one of the biggest med tech deals of the last couple of decades. And they had some antitrust issues, and they had to divest an asset. And there were a couple players at the table for that asset, a couple of very large ones in your neighborhood, and we outmaneuvered those players and won. We got in front of the FTC and we outmaneuvered the competitors. We got the deal done with Medtronic, and we were the underdog, but it was our team that came together and figured out what we needed to do in order to win. And we were nimble enough with the process. And I'll give you an example of, our legal counsel that on that project, who was formerly at the FTC. She said, we got on a call with Medtronic. They said, we're ready. Put us in front of the FTC tomorrow. we're good, we'll be ready. We got on a phone an hour later and she goes, you guys are not ready. Okay.
Those are not the good conversations.
That's right. We need to build a full execution deck. And so this team, and it's not 100 people, it's a half a dozen leaders. We put a 250-page deck together of how we were going to carve this asset out and how we were going to build it, get the regulatory approvals, and launch the product just as good as what Covidian would have done with their infrastructure in place. And that's what a great team gets you to do, versus if you've got a bloated team or folks that can't rally around a single cause, you couldn't turn on a dime that quickly.
How exciting was that for you and your team when you locked it down? When you actually,
it was fantastic. I mean, it created a ton of value. And I would say in many ways, it made that organization relevant. And suddenly we were, in a different category when we were partnering with our physician partners on the journey ahead for the betterment of patient care.
Amazing, Shar. Those are the things, everybody looks at success that you've had various parts of your career and think, oh, it's linear, it's easy, it happens. And those are the moments people realize it's taking that chance, working hard, and actually being able to outmaneuver. So hats off. I'd like to talk a little bit about other pivotal moments in your career as well, because I think those are where we learn who we are, learn how we lead, and where we go. So are there other lessons and parallels that you can draw upon and share with this group as they're thinking about and as they're living it themselves?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as I shared, I think talent is number one. Culture is right there. I think all of us have to be purposeful with culture. And I remember when someone asked me the question of, well, yeah, you've written these values on the wall. How do you make sure that it sticks or that folks are living it? And it was a great question because I was like, you're right. I don't know. And you've got to build a closed loop. You got to have a reinforcing way of doing it. So we actually have culture awards. You can get a spot award for an accomplishment, but you can honor one another. And it's very powerful when teammates are honoring one another. And that's how you build the culture into your DNA. So that's a critical element. And I know a lot of startups don't even, think about that. That almost feels like it's a nice to have when money's tight and you're raising the next funding round. But reality is that's what drives how everyone behaves and works together, how you recruit great talent. And that's a critical element of it. And the other one that, as I reflected on the question, it's around your relationships, both inside your organization and outside. And I can't say I had the fortitude or the foresight to know this, but when you're in a specific segment of a market for many, many years, you start to build both a reputation, but also a network of individuals that, as time goes by and folks go into different roles, you can collaborate with one another. So keeping those relationships alive and strong, you never know where you might partner with one another, where someone might be your investor or you're on the other side of the table negotiating on a deal with a former, classmate or a former colleague of yours. So, for me, I've been lucky enough to be in the med tech space and specifically cardiovascular and having built that network. So I thought that was incredibly valuable as all of you are looking at, the various entrepreneurial opportunities you've got.
So before we take it towards maybe some of the unique financing and the structures on Cordis and sort of what we talked about in our pre-meeting, I want to ask you, we've talked about a lot of the successes, right? Where you've been able to bring the teams together, but sometimes we have failures or we've had opportunities, pieces that we've learned a lot from. Can you talk a little bit about maybe one or two of those in your career and what you gleaned from it going forward?
Yeah, I mean, there's always, you learn as much about leadership or about business through your failures as you do from your successes. Because as I look at it and I look at, why do you go to the great physicians that have done a lot of cases? If the case is straightforward and easy, the newly graduated physician can do the case, but it's when issues occur that you want them to have learned with someone else and not you on the table. So I think business is very much in the same way. And I think there's a lot of, reflection around talent. You're hoping that someone who's not making the cut is going to turn it around, or you can coach them and train them to really change. And to me, those have been some of the ones where, as I look back, it's like if I had only gone sooner on getting my team to the right place, it would have been a benefit to both the organization, but to the rest of my teammates. I think there's a lot of those, and that's more general. And then personally, I think, there was some management changes at a previous company, and I was a candidate for the CEO job. And I went in, I was interviewing, I was in my mid-30s, excited about, look what I can do. And it was that piece around the relationships that I talked about. What I hadn't done is I was doing my job and I was doing great at the strategy, the execution. I didn't build the relationships with the board. I didn't spend that time to build that trust so that they could see with the changes they needed to make that I should have been, they trusted that I could execute on a new direction for the organization. And so to me, that was humbling when someone else is picked. I learned a ton through the process and also working for that leader. And we're very, very close friends now. But it's always those kinds of setbacks when you don't get it. Or that promotion that you can look back and say, well, what skill sets did I not have? And, first you go through, the different stages of denial and grief and then anger. And then you say, okay, what can I do to become better? And so I see those elements as key learnings through the journey.
Fantastic. And Shar, we have an audience question that was taking us exactly where we're going. Stephen Zielinski is talking a little bit about Cordis and kind of the things that happened in the 90s, the hostile takeover by J&J, and then sold to Cardinal, now under this new holding company. What's different with the brand? What is this time around? And as you think about it, where do you want to take Cordis? What's going to occur? And Steve's also looking forward to seeing you in April. Apparently you're talking at a MedTech SMMG talk. So he wanted to say he's looking forward to that.
Steve and I worked together there and or at a previous company. And, as you look at Cordis, the way that I've positioned it for folks is, and I love talking about Cordis more than I like talking about myself. It's the first time in 36 years that Cordis is led by MedTech leaders, not by pharma, not by supply chain executives, but by MedTech focused on our customers. And that's the advantage of being, carving out and becoming an independent company. Our focus is our teammates and our customers. And so when we were looking at acquiring Cordis, first thing that we were, looking to make sure of is the brand intact and is the business stable? And then can we bring innovation to the table? And we were surprised in a pleasant way that the pride and the passion with the team was incredible. Everyone remembers Cordis. Internally, folks remember the days where we were innovating. Many of our physicians would tell you that, they wouldn't be where they were today if it weren't for Cordis and what Cordis did for them in their fellowships. So we had that foundation. In the same breath, they would tell you that their fellows don't know you. So that's what we've got to change. And the best way to do that is to bring innovation to the table. So that's where, from a business model perspective, what we're doing differently is, and this was the brainchild of our executive chairman, Duke Rollin, is we've got Cordis as a chassis, and then we've got an incubator that H&F and KKR, our investors, put $300 million into. That's an accelerator incubator that's going to spin out startups. And when they get close to getting regulatory approval, we acquire those startups into Cordis and we launch them. So it's taking advantage of product development and innovation in a startup environment, but having the scale and global reach of a brand and a company like Cordis, and bringing the best of both worlds together and doing this in a symbiotic relationship, as opposed to, hey, this startup fails, that startup's successful, and everyone's going to bid on it. We're doing it in an environment where we build the strategy across both, and then we figure out how we can maximize the opportunity to bring new innovation to our customers.
Okay, sure. I mean, that has to be one of the most innovative models, bringing together the established brand, the innovation internally, externally. Talk about this for this group, because so many on the call are in med tech and innovation and acceleration. How did that strategy come together? How did you convince the KKRs of the world that they should be financially backing this? This is unique in many ways.
Yeah, absolutely. And part of it is, it's unique. It's got a little bit of, I'll say, the flavor of the whole, pharmaceutical, biotech, sector that we're transferring to med tech. And the way that I say it is, when we're successful with this, it's going to be copied. What we're really doing is we're giving ourselves internal innovation as one pillar. External innovation through Cordis X is what we're calling our accelerator incubator. And then we've got M&A and licensing. So we've got one more shot on goal. And the way that we persuaded, and I'd say much of the credit goes to Duke, is that as we talked about what is the challenges with innovation right now, and everyone could relate to that in a large company, right? You've got competing priorities that are pulling you in different directions. You've got 50 different R&D projects. Everyone's looking to get some sort of financing for for their project to move forward. So in many ways, you're just allocating a little bit of capital to each one. And then when business reality hits, China COVID occurs, you've got to put a pause on your expenses. You slow everything down. So by doing this off balance sheet, we protect that innovation. But we also have each one of the entrepreneurs is living or dying by that project, as opposed to having to worry about competing projects that they gotta compete for assets or headcount or whatnot. And the other thing that we're doing is we're taking all of that overhead, and this is more for the entrepreneurs, that many entrepreneurs that love innovating may be not great fundraisers. They may not be great HR, folks that want to recruit but don't have that infrastructure. So we're building that back office infrastructure that's leverageable, and the entrepreneurs can focus on designing innovative products, getting it to regulatory approval, handing it off to us to scale it, and then they can go back and do it again. And it's got this preset model where they can focus all their energies on the innovation as opposed to all of the overhead. And I think our competitive advantage over time, as we talk about the innovation flywheel, is we're going to do it again and again, and we're going to get better at it, because we're not going to get it perfect the first time. But we've got 9 development companies that we've spun out so far. Each one of them is at a different phase. We'll learn from one another, from each one. And as we integrate them and go do it again, we're going to build this symbiotic relationship and partnership that we think is going to be an innovation competitive advantage for us.
Hey, do you take board positions in these companies? Do you have pre-negotiated terms for Cordis? How do you make sure that that connection is there for you and for Cordis going forward?
That's right. So we've got a steering committee, and really it's the Cordis X team that manages those. So it's a different skill set from running and building an organization. And then through the steering committee, that's where we monitor how we're doing to all the different elements of it, and what key decisions we have to make.
Fantastic. We have another audience question, and I'm going to try and maybe paraphrase it. So excuse me if I don't get it perfectly correct, but we have on the line a software medicine and has a product in the field. And the question goes really to, what's a good rule of thumb when you launch a medical device in the US? And actually, apart from having a good team, what other pieces should you think about? And when that gets pretty specific, so this may be helpful for the listener, when you're selling in sort of an area of both a hospital, a home, and maybe geriatric, thinking about all the different areas for treatment and pains that you would have to do you do it direct, or do you think about distributors?
Yeah, I think every business, and I can't say I'm an expert in that area to be able to give you the specifics around it. I think there's 3 key pieces to almost any medical technology that are critical. And I've been in enough different areas to say they're always almost the same. So once you've shown the clinical value, you've got to look at the economics of it. What are the economics? What's the ease of use? And how much does a relationship drive the sale? So when you take those three elements, so the ticket to the game really is it's got value, it's got clinical value. Then depending on what the medical device or technology is, how much do the other three play a role in driving that conversion from whatever that physician or that patient is doing today? So, tied to the question you're asking is if that sale process really depends on a very close relationship between a salesperson and that geriatric clinic, then you should get a distributor, or you should hire direct reps that have that relationship. If it's economically, it has incredible returns that it's just a no-brainer, then maybe you can use a different model and not have to have a portion of your profit margin given to a distributor. But those are the three elements that you've got to weigh and really be brutally honest with yourself of how does your product compare to the competition, and how does your, what's that channel that's going to drive the most adoption.
That's right off the cuff. Well done, Shar. It actually takes me a little bit back to Cordis and some of the work you're doing from that steering team. Are you getting into the strategy of each of these companies as sort of that steering group? Do you help them think about they're the best at the innovation and then coming along with strategy and taking it to market in pieces? How do you work? So many of the companies in Matter look for that expertise as well and are seeking it. It'd be great for them to hear a little bit about how you do it from a steering committee perspective.
Yeah, the way that we did it is we actually brought Cordis and Cordis X together, and we built our broad-based strategic plan of what we would need to win in the marketplace, and really achieve our vision. And our vision is to save billions of lives by innovating on cardiovascular technologies, pioneering cardiovascular technologies. And so we didn't want to just be a niche player. We didn't want to just be a me too. So how do we do that? And then we looked at the strengths of what Cordis has, and we looked at what other portfolio ads we needed to do, and then who were the best of the best out in the marketplace that could bring it. So instead of waiting for folks to come to us, it was really, we were purposeful around what our product strategy was. And today I'd say it's a product strategy. Longer term, it's going to be, I think, beyond a product strategy as we figure out and take it to the next level of what can we do for cardiovascular care. And that's how the steering committee kind of came together and figured out what pieces we needed, and then we went and sourced it. So it was more of a, let's go pull it, as opposed to, who's available and who's got what ideas. We do that. We see from an M&A and licensing perspective. That's more, I'll say, from the traditional way that people just, if someone's got a great idea, they bring it to us. So that, because we know that, we're not going to have all the ideas, so we leave some space for that as well.
I just find it fascinating that you have private equity investors supporting this area of your business where it's a little different. Talk to us a little bit about that. I'm an early stage investor, often looking to get private equity involved, and this is not the model I typically see. I'd be thrilled to hear a little bit about that.
And that you've got to have the right private equity investors, right? And we were, I could say for Cordis, from what I remember, there were, I could say close to 10 bidders early on. And everyone had their models of what they thought would create value. And credit to Hellman & Friedman and KKR, and we're in KKR's growth fund. It's H&F invests, and they're typically investing in high growth businesses with growth capital. That's just the model that they go after. And KKR's growth fund has some very similar elements to it. So and early in the discussion, if it was Cordis as a standalone, they would not be the typical investor in it. If it was venture investing like the Cordis X, they would not be a typical investor. It was the combination of these two that they were ready to back, seasoned executives that had a thesis, and we all believe we could create a ton of value by bringing these two together. And when I talk about value, the only way to create, shareholder value is really to delight your customers and have great teammates. So doing those two right will really drive that value. And we thought this was a unique opportunity for us to do it. And it didn't hurt that we got in my view, at a pretty good price as well.
Shar, I can tell you come alive talking about Cordis. There's no doubt about it. And it leads me to ask a question. when you were thinking about Cordis being an option for you personally and what you want it to do, you talked a little bit about when you hire teams, you're looking for passion. What was this that was passionate for you? Why Cordis?
Yeah, great question. Because I can tell you, when you look at certain opportunities, face value, a lot of folks see like risk and, oh, that's going to be tough and it's going to be a slog and all that. And again, it goes back to like your past experiences. And I was at a former company that, stumbled, went down dramatically. Stock price went down 90%. And then, as I mentioned, I was a candidate for the CEO position, and then we got a new CEO, and together we basically turned that company around and created a ton of value. And I loved the idea of building, and we took that company from 100 million to 300 million, internal innovation, M&A, and we got it to a place where a strategic came and acquired us. I believe we can do that with Cordis on a much greater scale. It's got an incredible brand, it's got incredible infrastructure, and it was lacking innovation. And we're bringing innovation and a new business model to the table. And I see it as actually a lower risk when we purchase a company at 1.3 times sales than more risk. But there's work, and you need teammates and other leaders that are willing to go through the build process and love to build, because for every 2 steps you go forward, you might take a step back, but net you're going to build something of incredible value over time.
Do you think that's what attracted you to the strategy of having Cordis tied to it? Because they're builders. Every entrepreneurs on this call, they're builders. That's what everyone is trying to do. Talk a little bit about when you talk to an innovator, how do you assess if they're a builder, how they're putting it together?
Yeah, it goes, the way I even in my career have looked at assessing talent is, there's stewards of businesses in my view, and there's builders of businesses. And you can have an incredible career in either. You just have to know what your skill sets are, and do they align with being a steward or a builder? Because that's what will get you excited when you wake up in the morning. That's what, your calendar speaks differently if you're a steward of a business than if you're a builder of businesses. So it's having that conversation, but it's looking at the track record of folks. And it doesn't matter if you're a large company or small company. If you were part of a large company, but you always went to small division and you built it, and then you got bored when it was more of a single digit grower and you went to another division, that's evidence that you love building. You may enjoy the security of a larger organization, but you're a builder. So those are the pieces where, as you have conversations and you talk about historical experiences, to your point, you start seeing where people come alive. And simple questions I ask is, every role, what do you like about the job? What do you not like about the job? And what made you decide to move on? In those simple questions, after the 5th or 6th one, you can figure out pattern recognition. What drove that individual to make decisions one way or another? And it tells a lot about, are they builders or are they stewards of businesses?
I love the analogy of look at the calendar, see how people are spending their time. I want to ask you a little bit, put your futuristic glasses on, put your, next 24, 36 months. Where do you see Cordis? How do you see under where you're taking it, the innovation piece? Maybe it's 5 years, don't put a time frame, but as you're looking forward, share with the audience a little bit about what you're thinking and seeing.
Yeah, I'll put the time frame longer, because I think the real value is created over a longer period of time. And what I tell folks is the beauty of cardiovascular care right now is there's no silver bullet, so there's space for disruption. So the same way, if you look at Cordis's history, it had a lot of firsts. First nylon balloon, first, they brought the pulmonary shot stent to market, first drug-eluting stent. Each time Cordis was disrupted or market share was taken by a competitor, and Cordis came back with a new innovation. So that's, for us, it's really, let's separate from Cardinal Health. Let's optimize our core platform. Let's have a couple, shots on goal in the near term that accelerate our growth rates. So Could it be markets where we can be one of the top 3 players, which, in some cases we are today, and we can make iterations on our products. But really, what's the next 1 or 2 disruptive innovations that will really change the standard of care in cardiovascular? And if you saw recently, we purchased a company called MedAlliance, or we announced the deal will close later this year. That's around, our thesis wasn't bringing a drug-coated balloon to the peripheral vascular. It was, could the sirolimus-based drug-eluting balloon change the way cardiovascular medicine is done? Could it bring the leave no metal behind, I'll say, algorithm that's been used in the peripheral vascular to the coronaries? So it's those kinds of bets that we're going to make to really become that innovator we were historically. And as we put it, we're building, the foundation on our legacy, but really we're invested in the future of innovation.
I mean, it's so interesting. You started this conversation about the DNA of the people you hire and understanding what's in them. It sounds like Cordis had the DNA of innovation and building, and that's what you were looking for. Talk a little bit about when you do look for, because you've talked about 3 strategies, right? We've gone into Cordis X quite a bit. You've also talked a little bit about internal innovation. What's the strategic M&A thought process around Cordis and some of the activities that you've just mentioned? Give a little more detail on that for us.
Yeah, and what you've got to do there, and I wish you could say you create a strategy and it's perfect and you don't have to iterate it. I'm a big believer in a management process called HPMS. We call it the Cordis Business System that we've adopted. Danaher's got its model, everyone's got their model, but you got to have a process in which you're constantly looking at your voice of customer, your voice of teammate, your voice of shareholders, taking those as inputs, and then figuring out how can you move the willingness to recommend for each one of your stakeholders? And then, making decisions quickly, getting it about 80% right, going out and executing, and then getting the feedback and then saying, okay, what do I need to, do I keep doing what I'm doing because it's working? Do I need to change, or do I need to scrap what we were thinking of and do it totally differently? And to me, again, for medicine, a new clinical paper comes out, it might totally drive the direction of what will really impact patients' lives in a different way. And you've got to be ready to pivot and look at what that is. So for us, that's when we look at M&A, it's a lot of those pieces. It's as we're doing our own strategic product development for the current unmet needs that we see, how do we keep an eye on what's happening in the marketplace and what's disruptive? And could that drive a shift in our strategy ultimately to fulfill our vision? And so that's how we're looking at M&A and keeping an eye on what's new and what is it that we haven't thought of. It's ideas we haven't thought of that's really going to drive our M&A strategy.
Which, my words, not yours, but you have a 3-legged stool in innovation. Right. External, internal, and M&A. How did the internal innovation arms of Cordis interact with or help seek out some of the external pieces you may be thinking about? How do they interact with one another? And how do you make a decision whether you're going to do it internally or seek it externally, whether it be M&A or through Cordis X?
Great question. That's part of the skill set we're building. And it's iterative again, as we figure out, okay, what makes sense. So I'd say right now it's loose and it's those teams collaborating together and making decisions. I'd say the core of it is understanding what are the core capabilities that we have internally, and what are we really strong at from a technological or differentiated perspective. Let's do those types of projects internally. And if it's a core set of capabilities that we don't have that team externally drive it. And then when it's ready, we can bring that capability in-house. So over time, we're going to build a core of strengths that we historically didn't have, or maybe we had, 10, 15 years ago when Cordis was a different company, but we've lost over time because innovation had become a smaller part of our, future in the past. So I'd say that's really what drives the decision of internal versus external.
And Shar, you talked a little bit about sometimes having the right team. You can have a big bloated team that can't move quickly. You had a quick, nimble leadership team that put 250 slides together to outsmart and get what you needed. What team comes together on these innovation questions and to answer this strategy at a moment of decision for Cordis?
Yeah, it's a mixture of both our team and Cordis X. So it's at the leadership level right now. And I would say over time, it's how do we build the infrastructure so we can push that decision-making further. And we're more, we're playing more of an oversight role, but there's just such great clarity that we can drive a lot of that discussion decisions lower in the organization. But I'd say we're in the early innings of building that core competency.
What's your biggest lesson learned along this way, if you don't mind sharing with this group around maybe great learnings in a good way and a hard way? Because innovation is what that's what Matters Soul is about, right? It's about innovating in this area. What can you glean from it that might be helpful to everyone listening today?
Yeah, I would say on the innovation side, always be open, right? Don't be myopic. Take those meetings, but be really steadfast on the strategy. Because if you chase each one of these, you'll lose sight of what you're trying to do. But you don't know what may come out of the different ideas. So is there a way to say, look, 80% execution, focused on what you're trying to do today, and then really leave some space to forward think or leave that flexibility around, what else is possible that you're not thinking of. But it's a balance there, because that shiny object from far away can really get exciting, but really might be a waste of time.
And maybe that goes to something I know you've talked a little bit about. Innovation's no longer just about a product, right? That shiny product object. It's about some other things these days, including economic benefit. How do you think about looking at sort of that shiny object and ensuring that there's some economic benefit there? And I'll keep talking while you clear your throat there, Shar. You might need a little drink of water with all these conversation pieces. Give you a bit of a break.
Thank you, Nancy. Yeah. As you mentioned, things have changed over time as well, where the economic side of it's critically important for the hospital. And so that's got to be a key part of when you're talking about what kind of innovation. So it might be the same therapy, but a lot more cost effective. And that might be the win, especially in different care environments as well.
How do you get change in care environments? For us on our end, when we're looking at early stage venture investment, we're assessing what's the opportunity here in the technology. How do we think about the team? What do we think it's going to displace? And then we have to figure out, how do we change behavior? So while economically it might be driving the right answer, we don't know how we're going to change behavior. How do you put all those pieces together? And we don't believe, and maybe you can shed some light for us, you don't always win on economics, because human behavior sometimes will dictate a very different perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'll say it's a science experiment that we're all living through right now, because it's healthcare is changing in the US. And for me, it was a wake-up call where you could actually talk to a physician today and he could tell you his P&L. He didn't know his P&L 10 years ago. Now he actually knows what P&L is. And we joke with our chief medical officer, he knows what an EBITDA is. Who knew that at a physician level? So it is changing. And how do you become part of that solution? But do we have a silver bullet around it? No, and that's why I go back to the three elements. There's the economics, there's the relationship, and there's ease of use. And it's a mixture of the three.
Some of our participants today may also be dealing with some regulatory and the thoughts around regulatory and moving things through a regulatory horizon, and then to reimbursement as well. Can you talk a little bit about how that is factored into your thoughts of what innovations you move forward? Obviously, patient care and patient impact leading it, but some of the realities in regulatory and reimbursement.
Yeah, regulatory, it's gotten better, I would say, and FDA is far more collaborative, but that's a critical element of, what does it take to get approval? And then from a reimbursement, that's the economic side of it. So you've got to be very purposeful with it, of, either build products that can be in existing codes, or you got to build in the timeline of what it takes to change a code or get add-on payments or whatnot. So I'd say that's a critical key factor in deciding either if you're investing internally, in our case, if we're investing externally, or looking at M&A or licensing. But you've got to be purposeful with both of them.
So for the participants thinking about this, it's not only about that shiny object, the important product. It is about these other things as you talk to, whether it be a potential strategic organization, an innovation group, an investor, making sure you cover those areas, because without all of those pieces coming together, it's pretty hard to actually bring a deal together. And you're seeing that, it sounds like, in your day-to-day work.
That's right. I mean, it is, it's what we live day to day, and it's the discussion.
And I want to ask you a little bit about moving out to maybe macro trends. We've seen sometimes where therapeutics do great, med tech may suffer, and this pendulum going back and forth and the different areas. Tell me where you think med tech sits now and maybe in the next 3 to 6 sort of years around med tech, because we've watched different sort of cycles, let's say.
I look at it and say, because med tech, there's been a lack of investment in med tech. I think it's a unique opportunity. There's just a lot less assets. And as larger organizations look at acquiring for growth, you can look at the Abiomed deal, very few cardiovascular assets. They got acquired for 17 billion, 17 times sales. So I'd say asset prices are going up because there's not a lot of them. And so I see that as an opportunity for innovators and financial backers to back the right technologies. Now, a Me Too or number 6 to market is not going to get investments, but if you can come up with a solution to an unmet need, I think it's a great time, because there's just a shortage of assets out there in any segment of med tech today.
It's really funny. I will tell you, you basically have said what 5 years ago we were talking to a different venture group that was creating this exact thesis, because they said exactly was going to happen. The underinvesting was going to provide less assets, and assets would be more valuable. And it's interesting to hear you running an external innovation group and pieces, noticing that that has come to light. So we have another audience question, and I think that'll be either our last or second to last question today. It's about innovators and founders, to the point sort of broadly, when's a good time for them to bring commercial level expertise to develop that strategy and execution plan? When should they be bringing that on board for them at a very early stage, sort of innovators and founders? When should they think about these type of people and expertise?
Yeah, and I think it depends. It always depends, right? You got to get the voice of customer on the product early on. So you got to figure out how to do that. So if you personally have access as an entrepreneur to KOLs, but don't just do KOLs, also do, like I'll say, high volume clinicians. Get a mixture of voices and those fingerprints, and from the different care settings as well. Do that early. If you've got access to that, great. You don't need the commercial folks early on. If you don't, bring commercial folks on early to be able to build those relationships, open those doors, and really get that voice of customer and their fingerprints on your product. That's the way that I think makes sense. But it all, again, depends on both the product and your own skill set and experience in the space.
Do you see for early stage companies that this is maybe a skill set, if they can get to the key opinion leaders, they do it themselves, introduce themselves as an entrepreneur, maybe get access in a new way, or bring on sort of the expertise in a consulting role? Do they bring it on full time? How do you see it being important for their future success?
Yeah, ideally, if you can make it part of your team, and we talked about the DNA, and it's the right person and they got a vested interest, I'd encourage folks to do that. I mean, consultants are great, but they're not going to live and die by the success of the company. So how do you get that, passion in there with you? And I think that's critical.
Okay, so building on living and dying by success. Is there any advice at the final end for our entrepreneurs who are listening that you want to share?
I would say take risks, build a great team, and an incredible culture where everyone wants to work and be in that company. I think that you get those pieces right, you'll find your way regardless of what setbacks you have, and ultimately with perseverance and grit, you're going to win.
Grit's a word we haven't heard yet today, but it's what I often, when we look at entrepreneurs at an early stage, we think grit matters only because things rarely go the way you expect. Things rarely go in that linear fashion. Tell me a little bit about how you pulled out some grit on the Cordis deal, because normally you assess grit at an early stage, but I think grit happens all the way through. How did you have to pull some of that out, Shar?
Absolutely. I mean, think about the carve out and separation that we're doing. McKinsey rated a like 4 out of 5 on a difficulty scale. I've had people go, "Ooh, that's a challenging one you're going through," and we're living it, right? Getting it all right. We have setbacks every day. The team's leaning in. They're figuring out what challenges they've got to address so that we can delight our various stakeholders, and we're working through it. But I can tell you that there's days where we've got lots of wins and there's days where we have setbacks, but we know what the prize is at the end of it. And any of the other folks, and it's a trend in medtech that are doing separations, it is a heavy lift to as I call it, it's almost like we're doing spinal transplant surgery. And someone asked me, said, "How often does that happen?" I go, "I don't know when it happens, but that shows you how what the challenge is, because we literally are building our whole ERP separate and then taking, segments of the business off of Cardinal Health onto our own, ERP, which is the backbone of the whole organization. So that takes a bunch of grit for the team that's executing on it.
Shar, I can't thank you enough for spending time chatting. You got through all of the audience questions, all of my questions. You shared so honestly, and it's just been such a great pleasure to spend time with you. Thank you on behalf of the entire group. We really appreciate it.
Great. I appreciate it, Nancy. And thanks so much for having me on with you.
You bet. And I'll turn it to Stephen.
Yeah, thank you both. Charlotte, Nancy, it was a terrific conversation. Really enjoyed it. Thanks to everybody for joining us. And if you enjoyed today's program, you might want to tune in next week for our inaugural 51 Labs final showcase, which is our women's health platform, in person and virtually on March 3rd. Our next Tales from the Trenches program features Stephanie Tillinius, who's the CEO and founder of Vita Health, on April 12th. You can learn about those and all of our events on our website, matter.health. And thank you both again. Thank you all for joining us. And I hope you all enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks so much.
Thank you. Take care.